Hey, what's up? I wanted to jump on and share my August Roundup. If you are unfamiliar, basically once a month at my Substack, I share the best reading and podcast recs from the previous month. And I started sharing them on YouTube as well recently, just for folks here and who prefer video. So this is my Roundup post for August 2023. I'm going to start with the podcast recs. So the first one is the new podcast from David Burrell. David is kind of a well-known person on Twitter. He has a popular writing course called Rite of Passage, and just all around has some great insights he shares about writing and creating things online for an audience. But he launched a new podcast. I think he had another one called North Star. But this new podcast is called How I Write. And so far, I think the premise is basically just talking to writers about their process and how they think about ideas for writing, writing for an audience online or otherwise, and just interesting process conversations. And he launched with some incredible episodes and some new ones that have come out too. So he's spoken with Kevin Kelly, he's spoken with Tyler Cowen, and the one I'm recommending in the August Roundup is with Derek Thompson, who's a well-known writer for The Atlantic, and he has a great podcast that I've recommended before. And this conversation they had is just awesome. It's a good deep dive into how Derek thinks about idea generation and sort of the concept of novel and important being his criteria for what is worth sharing. And so, yeah, I recommend checking that out if you make things online in general, especially if it's writing. The next recommendation in the podcast category is a conversation on a podcast called Econ Talk, which I haven't heard about, but I get the sense it's been around for a while. But it's a conversation with Andy Matuszak, who I've kind of been spending time with Andy's work for the past few months after recently discovering that work. I think because of Dwarkesh's podcast, The Lunar Society, is how I first encountered Andy. But yeah, Andy has a great chat on the Econ Talk podcast, specifically about a piece of writing called, so Andy puts out these like notes, like kind of research notes. It's kind of just an essay. And there's this really fantastic piece on Andy's site called Why Books Don't Work, kind of about the whole premise of a book in terms of knowledge transmission and information transmission being inefficient, and kind of some newer models and innovations that Andy's researched with his partner Michael about how to improve learning systems and long-term memory and things like that. It's a really good conversation. And especially the back half focuses on education reform in general. And Andy worked at Khan Academy for a long time, so he has a lot of interesting insights there. Okay, so reading recs. One of the reading recs is Why Books Don't Work by Andy, so I definitely recommend checking that out. It's not a long read at all, and I think it's kind of one of those essays that sends ideas rippling in your mind after you finish reading it. So there's a lot of roads leading out from this, which I really value in writing. The other reading rec is this beautiful piece from George Saunders, who's one of the writers I've been really drawn to over the years. And I think, George teaches, so his writing about writing in life, so his nonfiction stuff is what I'm talking about specifically, is very digestible and clear. And it has a warmth that the best professors and teachers that I admired had. So George has this piece specifically called My Writing Education, a Timeline, where he literally blocks out sort of over the years his progress from working as an engineer, having never written anything folks had read, to, George Saunders, best-selling author and kind of a modern pillar of the writing world. So it's just a beautiful piece, very honest, and it's not really just a piece about his progress becoming a writer and experience writing. It's also kind of a meditation on what the best teachers do for us. And George focuses heavily on two of his professors and teachers in his writing life. And it's really worth checking out. The third recommendation is kind of in the theme of a lot of things I've been thinking about this year, which are about improving reading and the way reading has changed now that the internet exists and now that screens exist as kind of the main information transmission medium and even the main way people read things. And it's a piece called What Screens Want. That's by Frank Camaro, I think. Camaro is how you say his name. But had to take a break to grab my computer charger, but I was speaking about What Screens Want. It's really awesome essay. And yeah, I was gonna kind of just serve up the premise as I see it, that is captured in a single paragraph or really sentence from the essay. So it's basically every material has a grain. So think of like wood having a grain. Every material has a grain, a certain way they've grown and matured that describes how they want to be treated. And then I think this essay is a wonderful and non-technical survey of the grain of screens, which Frank determines is flux, so the capacity to change dynamically. And it's very interesting because, I launched PrinterNet, which is taking the best writing online, so your Substack newsletters, anything from your reading list online, which is where the really great writing tends to happen right now on the internet, and delivering it to you in a print medium, because I think that offers all sorts of benefits that give it an advantage to reading on screens. But that being said, I'm keenly aware that there are advantages that screens offer that print doesn't, of course. And really, it is that ability to be dynamic and have flux. And so I've been looking for things like this that really highlight the advantages of screens as a medium. And this is a great essay on that. Next up is an essay by Graydon Hoare, or Hoare, not sure. But it's Always Bet on Text. And it's a pretty short, succinct essay about how text, words, is sort of the eternal, enduring medium or tool for human culture and thought. And so it really resonates because I think right now a lot of the media we consume is image-based and video-based. And I think text is highly underrated right now, even though there's sort of more of it from a volume standpoint at our fingertips than there ever has been. So yeah, I really enjoyed that piece. And then the last reading rec of this roundup is a piece from James Saunders, who's one of my favorite writers. I discovered him last year and kind of I try to read everything he's put out. And there's this older piece, I think 2019, maybe 2018, that he wrote in the New Yorker called The Pastry AI That Learned to Fight Cancer. And it's really entertaining read, but it's about a Japanese founder and his software company. But it's, not super technical. It's very accessible. But it's basically about the basically this research group in Japan was conducting research on how to run a successful pastry shop, bakery in Japan. And they found that the more variety the shop had, the more money they made. So if you offered only 10 pastry types, you'd make X amount. And if you offered 30 pastry types, you'd make 4x or something like that. And so the other finding they made was that when you didn't actually individually package the pastries at all, but instead just had them loose, grouped together in baskets, they kind of seemed more fresh and people wanted to buy them more, and the pastry shop made more money. So they put this into practice and opened all these pastry shops in Japan that had like 300 plus pastries to choose from. And they were all packageless. So they had no barcodes, they had no plastic wrapping or anything. And the challenges that presented for the shops was that new employees would have to try to learn 300 plus pastry types and be able to identify them visually and know the price of them, because there's no packaging, there's no barcodes. And that was a very arduous process and took a long time. And then also just checking people out took a long time. And so these massive lines were forming and just slowing down the shops. So they hired this company, this software company that this piece is about, to try to solve this. And the way they did it was by creating image recognition software that can identify the pastries with just a camera. And the kind of heart of the piece is about how this was kind of a Herculean effort, because it was before our current era of machine learning, where you can just sort of feed in a bunch of raw data, so a bunch of images of pastries, and through sort of reinforcement learning and other AI tricks, you can create a really good image recognition software product. And this was done in more of like the original software, classic software approach of actually, instead of just giving it a bunch of images and making it learn what certain pastries look like from reinforcement learning and sort of trial and error, they actually tried to define how to identify pastries and distinguish them. And yeah, it's just a really great read, so I recommend that. And then I think I have some more updates and different projects and stuff, but I think this is kind of a good place to wrap. I'll just end by saying, on a personal note, August was a great month. PrinterNet did really well in August. It was our best-selling month since I started PrinterNet. I think sales were up 166% compared to July, so that was an amazing feeling to see that. And I've been building software to help me create PrinterNet issues. So each PrinterNet issue can have 5 essays or articles in it from your reading list, or there's an option where we pick the reading for you based on your Twitter and Substack, or one or the other, it's up to you. And each issue can have 5 reading selections. And previously what I'd done is use InDesign or Canva to sort of manually build the layout and the design of a PrinterNet issue. And that was good because it gave me a lot of control over it, over the aesthetic and the reading experience, but it was very arduous and tedious for me to do because it was a very manual process of going to the original link where the article or essay was published, copy and pasting the text, putting it into the Canva template or InDesign template, and this sort of process. And so I've been writing software to replace that process for me. And so I'm using Python, and I basically just have a text file where I can have infinite links to different essays and articles. And then my software goes to each of those URLs, grabs the HTML that represents, the website, and then removes unwanted things, ads, share buttons, social media buttons, writer bylines, or rather like bios, related reading, like all this stuff on a website that makes reading unpleasant, and it just cleans it to a very minimal book-like reading experience of the actual material and content of the article or essay. And so it does this automatically for me now. And the output, so let's say I put 5 URLs in, that's all I give the software, and the software returns a single file of all 5 reading selections, really beautifully formatted. So I'm really happy, and I sent out my first 2 issues that were made using this software instead of the previous manual process. So that felt really good. It feels like the software kind of reached milestone 1 of actually being useful and saving me time. Whereas in the previous months as I've been building it, it took a lot of tweaking and finagling. So I'm continuing to work on it. I have big ideas with how software is going to be involved in the PrinterNet project and product. And so August was a great month for PrinterNet. And then the other personal update is I redesigned and relaunched my personal website. So if you go to jakeweber.net, you can check that out. And my old website was super fun, and it was kind of an exploration in how playful and creative can I be with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And you know, I don't know how much I've talked about it on here, but I'm kind of a self-taught programmer, and I'm still very much learning. And that first website, that first personal website I put up was very much kind of a exploration of what's possible and me kind of pushing myself to do weird, interesting things. And so now that I am more comfortable with those three things, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I wanted to relaunch my site with a more minimalist approach and just a sort of less ostentatious, in-your-face, look how interesting and cool this website is. And instead, it's a little bit understated, but I still really enjoy it. I used this organizational structure across the whole website of this kind of bento box design, where every page kind of has a box within box container like system. So yeah, check that out. That's been fun too, and I'm still iterating on it and have a lot more ideas, but it's a good start. So yeah, that's the August Roundup. You can get these in your email if you go to my Substack and subscribe. So that's readpolymathematics.substack.com. And yeah, I put one out at the beginning of each month, and that'll go to your email. If you want one of these style of Roundup posts where I give recommendations for reading and podcasts every week, I share one every Friday for paid subscribers. So if that's something of interest to you, for $5 a month, you'll get 4 of the Roundup posts, one every Friday, and then the big Roundup post as well for a total of 5. So tons of recommendations. And you'll get access to the full archive of my writing. So if you're just on a free plan, which is totally fine and amazing, you'll get each new post as I write them, with the exception of those special Friday posts. And then you can see all my old writing from the previous year, but no further back. But if you're a paid subscriber at $5 a month, you can see the full archive of past a year. So yeah, check that out, and thanks for watching. Peace.